pretty late now. It's almost 11 p.m. Pacific, but we're back. We're done for the day. We've left the site, no longer at Indian Wells Center. Yeah, what was today like? I think today was the first day that it finally hit me. The exhaustion, the tiredness. It had to do with the heat, I think. It was pretty hot in the sun today, but it was also super crowded. So today's Friday. Welcome to the recap of Ground Pass on site. This is day 3. Can't believe we're doing day 3. This has been a very surreal experience, but loving it anyway. So let's get into day 3. So it's a Friday. And what happens on a Friday, which is, it's technically the weekend. We can call it the weekend, at a big tournament, is that the crowds finally show up. So this is the first weekend of Indian Wells, and usually these weekends are called the middle weekend because they kind of are in the middle of the tournament. They divide up the 2 weeks. Most Grand Slams have it. 1,000 events now that are 2 weeks long have middle weekends. I think there are only a few 1,000 events that are still only 1 week long. They're all transitioning to 2-week events, which could be a popular or unpopular opinion depending on who you are. I say space it out. It gives the players a little bit more time to recover versus banging through 1 week 1,000s back to back, which is what happened on the WTA side in Doha and Dubai. But I digress. Again, I am digressing. Let's bring it back to Indian Wells. So today was the middle weekend, and the crowds arrived. And this is when the planning that I've been talking about over the last couple of days really, really needs to be dialed in and come into focus, because there are just so many more people at this event. It's going to be a little bit harder to get to even the outside court. So I think on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the first few days of the week, it's not that crowded. You could still go on to sort of court 7 or court 6 and see your favorite player. But it is the weekend, so there are more people on site and more people with ground passes. I know I keep saying this. I won't stop saying it. The ground pass is one of the best tickets during the first week of a tournament, and most people have that during the first week of the tournament. The ground pass can get you into the general admission areas of some of the bigger stadiums, but not the whole thing. So it's usually probably the upper bowl part of a stadium. The ground pass will get you in there. Otherwise, all the outside courts are there for the taking, but that's you along with every other ground pass holder. So I do have to say the courts did get a bit crowded for the popular matches. I think Tsitsipas was playing on court 3, I believe, and there was just lines outside of it. There was no seats available. It was a really packed court, and that was kind of the theme for a lot of stadiums. I mean, Stadium 2 when Andy Murray was playing, jam-packed. Stadium 2 when Ben Shelton was playing, jam-packed. But it does create an awesome vibe. Like when a stadium of that size is completely filled and they're cheering for a player, it's almost surreal. It gives you goosebumps. It's such an incredible experience, and I hope we all get to experience one of those sorts of matches, and the vibes were just great today. I will say though, because of the number of people, the service was atrocious. Could not even get text messages, let alone send updates to the Threads or X or Instagram, wherever it is you follow Ground Pass. It was so hard to get any of that through because I was barely getting text messages. And I think it's because all of a sudden there were so many people at the venue. But I have to say, I mean, I've been to the US Open. I've been to the US Open numerous times, and I've never experienced this sort of just no service, no Wi-Fi. It was pretty dreadful. I'm hoping they just, reset the button for tomorrow, and hopefully we'll get better service. But yeah, this is just kind of what you have to deal with in sort of the first weekend of a big tournament like this. But I have to say, it was still fun. There was so much fun to be had. I think something I also noticed, this is kind of a feature of most big tournaments, is there's usually a big screen somewhere, or at least multiple screens, and I'll put a video of this in the recap on Instagram. If you haven't followed us on Instagram, I've been posting daily recap videos so you can kind of get a sense of what the grounds are like and like what's happening with the matches and things like that. I'm also going to be posting it to YouTube. I don't know if you knew we do have a YouTube channel. Haven't really promoted it. It just kind of sits there. All of our podcasts get loaded up into YouTube, but I'm trying to start dabbling in putting videos up there too. So stay tuned for that. Back to the big screens. So most big tournaments have these big screens, usually surrounded by either seating, a lawn, grass, whatever it is, so that people can just lay out and watch the tennis. So if you can't get into the big stadiums because you don't have a ticket to Stadium 1, which is all ticketed, then you can sit out there and watch what's happening on Stadium 1, or if you're at the US Open Ash or something like that. And it was a vibe, you know. I met up with some friends who were sitting in that area, and, you know, it was just people in sort of lawn chairs and sitting in the grass and having fun and catching up. This, I think, is the best thing about tennis tournaments. It's like you watch the tennis and then you hang out with friends. There's always stuff to do. The Bryan Brothers band was playing on the grounds today. You know, they had all the shops. Tennis Warehouse has their shop on site. There are really great bars and restaurants. There's a Nobu, guys. There's a Nobu at Indian Wells. So it's not just tennis, which is what I love too, because yes, you can be a tennis fan and you're totally into the tennis and you're there to see all your favorite players or see what's going on with certain matches and things like that. But you can also just bring your sort of non-tennis friends or your casual tennis friends who maybe might be interested in getting to know about tennis, and they don't just have to sit and watch the tennis. They can also do tons of other stuff around the ground. So it was definitely a great experience for the first weekend at Indian Wells. Again, the weather here is insane. I'm an East Coaster. It's really cold probably right now where I'm from, but it's beautiful and just surrounded by the mountains. It really is tennis paradise. They weren't joking with that hashtag. It lives up to the title. Now, what about the tennis? What did I do? What did I see? I got stuck on the practice courts for the first half of the day. I remember thinking today, and this is also what you need to realize, you could have a plan, but sometimes your plan just goes out the window. And I started the day because I saw on the practice schedule that Chris Eubanks and JJ Wolf were practicing. Both players are out of the tournament. They lost their first round matches. So I was surprised to see them there, but I had heard this is what tennis players do because they love Indian Wells so much. Even though they're out of the tournament, they stay behind. They stay behind and they practice preparing for Miami, which is coming up next. So they were both there practicing. I thought it was really great. Another thing about this tournament, I was sat next to a very young couple who were great. Hello, Jeremy and Angela. I was sat next to them during the practice on practice court 1. Jeremy has an Instagram page called Focus Tennis. You can follow it. I will link it in our description. But it was really great sitting next to them. And this is the great thing again, I said, you get to meet so many cool people. Like, I hadn't met them before. We were just sat next to each other and we started chatting about cameras and Instagram and, you know, tennis and all of that. And, you know, we're watching Chris Eubanks and JJ Wolf practice and they go, oh, by the way, Carlos Alcaraz is next. No, actually it was Tsitsipas and then Carlos Alcaraz and then Novak Djokovic. And I was like, well, that's kind of a really great practice run on this court. And I found myself just sitting next to them the whole time, chatting and going through all those practice sessions. That was the first half of my day. Totally unplanned, but it was fun nonetheless. I got great footage. It was really fun seeing them play, especially seeing Carlos play before his match, which I will talk about in a little bit because it was definitely something to see for sure. But yeah, so that was my first half of the day, and because it was unplanned, there were some matches I wanted to see, and the courts were a little crowded, so I just decided, you know what, not going to do that. I'm just going to go to court one, and I started my day with Iga Swiatek, who was playing against Danielle Collins. The thing I love about Iga is she's a learner. She learns, she studies, and she learns. And I think Danielle Collins has been a player that has bothered her in the past. And this time she said, no, I've learned my lesson. And she beat Danielle Collins 6-3, 6-love. Straight set, quite the scoreline. It was I thought it would be a little bit more competitive from Danielle Collins, which the first set a little bit was, but then she just dipped in the second, and Swiatek took advantage of that. So that was a really good match to start off with. And then I was able to get onto Stadium 2 to see Andy Murray, which if you follow us again on Instagram or Threads, you would have seen some of the footage from the crowd. It was packed and every person was just chanting Andy Murray. It was very touching. He played a really good first set, but not a good first set tiebreak, and it just went down from there. So the first set was 7-6. It went to a tiebreak, and then he lost. That was the first set, and then he lost the second set 6-1. So Andy Murray is out of the tournament, and Andrei Rublev, who he was playing, moves on. From there, I stayed on Stadium 2 to watch Ben Shelton. Ben Shelton, again, was playing Jakub Mensik, who, if you don't know, we talked about in our last regular episode. You know, he's a young Czech player coming up on the scene, and he got a wild card into Indian Wells because he's been doing so well. And he gave Ben Shelton a run for his money. He won the first set, and I think that was quite shocking to Ben Shelton. They've never played before, so I think he might not have known what to expect. But kind of like Iga, he's a learner, and it was really interesting and fun watching him actually problem solve on the fly and see how he could flip the match in his favor, which he did in the end. He won in 3 sets, and he moves on to the next round. Walked around for a bit. I also got to meet another Instagram friend, Brian. Hi, Brian. I don't know if you're listening. I will also tag him on in our description. He is on Instagram as well. I don't know, these events are really great to meeting people who you meet on Instagram because you both love tennis and you kind of can connect at these big events. So, I mean, I can't sort of stress how much fun going to live tennis is, and if you can ever find a tournament in your area, even if it's a challenger or a 125 with the WTA, these events are fun, and you get to connect with a lot of people who also love tennis, and it's a great activity, to just do on a weekend like it was today. What else did I watch today? Today was such a blur. I think, again, the heat of sitting in the heat at the practice court, because there's no shade. You're literally in the sun the whole time. And even if it's not hot, it's not hot and humid. It's pretty dry here. We're in the desert. Just sitting in that heat for that many hours does take its toll on you. And you might be thinking, wait, why were you just sitting there for all those hours? Well, here's the thing. It's 1 in, 1 out, and if you give up your seat at a practice session, you're going to lose it. I think we talked about this a little bit in yesterday's recap. These sessions get super, super packed. I ended my day with Carlos Alcaraz. It was his second round match. He got a bye in the first round, so it was his second round match coming in as the defending champion. He played against Matteo Arnaldi, who is a phenomenal young Italian player, and they played each other. The last time they played each other was the U.S. Open, I believe. I don't think they've played since the U.S. Open. Carlos won that match, but again, Matteo is a player that can push him. And the first set went into a tiebreak, and Matteo played this outstanding rally to win the first set tiebreak, and it was a shock, I think, to most people watching. There was definitely a little bit of like, oh no, what's happening? How did Carlos lose his first round match? Again, because I'm sure a lot of people in that audience didn't know who Arnaldi was. There was definitely an Italian contingent there, but I think everyone was expecting Carlos to just like win in straight sets and go home. And I think Carlos said, wait, I'm supposed to win in straight sets and go home. So the next two sets were a masterclass in what it is like to be a champion, because he won the next two sets 6-love, 6-1. I think he was mad. I think he said, how could I have lost that first set? And he just closed out Matteo Arnaldi. It was a sight to see. It was really, really well done. Really good way to close out a match. And I'm looking forward to his next one. He's playing FAA next. That should be fun. I think a lot of people might be thinking, oh, well, FAA hasn't been playing well. I would hold our horses. FAA has definitely been coming back. He's played some really good matches and tournaments since the beginning of the year. So I don't think this is sort of like another easy round for Carlos. I think he has a pretty tricky draw this time around. And we'll see. We'll see how he gets along playing FAA in the next round. So that's my recap for day 3. A little bit exhausted, I have to say. It's day 3 of attending a tournament. I remember doing this for the U.S. Open last year. I don't know if I've ever talked about this, but last year I had the opportunity to go to the U.S. Open every single day. Never done that before. And by the end of those 2 weeks, I was absolutely done. But it was the best experience of my life. And I am of the mindset of, you only live once. You might as well do all the cool things you've ever wanted to do. So here we are at Indian Wells, living our best life, having fun, and enjoying the tennis. I will see you all tomorrow.